at the right time.
Good morning and happy Monday to you. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines. Asian markets are off to a mixed start in the new trading week after posting their third straight weekly loss on Friday. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, along with his new Council of Ministers, will be sworn in on the 30th of May, according to the President's office. Former Jet Airways chairman Naresh Goyal, along with his wife, were denied permission to travel abroad by immigration authorities on Saturday. Goyal and his wife were deplaned from a Dubai-bound Emirates flight. The Reserve Bank of India has proposed new regulatory norms for NBFCs, including the presence of a liquidity coverage ratio to ensure robust governance and the presence of capital in times of stress. And top officials of Manpasand Beverages, including the managing director and CFO, were arrested by officials for GST evasion to the tune of 40 crore rupees. Let's talk about the US markets now. US stocks rose on Friday with thin volumes, but the gains weren't enough to compensate for a week of market turmoil that was riddled by trade tensions. Oil advanced while the 10-year Treasury yields edged higher and the dollar slipped. Ed Ludlow of Bloomberg News tells you exactly what happened in that session in this report.
It's been a tough week for US financial markets, principally driven by the ongoing trade war between the US and China. But on Friday, the market did take a little pause for breath. US equities closed higher. The S&P 500, the main gauge of US equities, closed up by around 0.3%, snapping 2 days of losses. But remember, that's amid thin trading volumes as the market headed into a long holiday weekend. In terms of areas of strength, we saw financial and technology shares really see the most notable gains. Of course, technology shares are those that have suffered most in recent sessions as the market digests lines on trade. In terms of some specific movers, Amazon up by 0.4%, Microsoft up by 0.3%, Facebook marginally higher, 0.1%. We're also seeing Boeing making some gains on Friday, closing up 1.2%. That's despite news that it's facing an SEC probe into disclosures it did or did not make regarding the 737 MAX troubles. But of course, we're approaching a fix on that front. Boeing is expecting a software fix for the 737 MAX to be approved in due course. When that SEC line hit, we did see shares pair gains, but then they bounced straight back, as I say, closing up 1.2%. In terms of areas of weakness, there was some in the chip makers, Qualcomm closing down 3%. Of course, that all relates to that ruling by a court in California earlier this week, siding with the FTC, saying that Qualcomm has abused its dominant market position with regards to its licensing business. The broader SOX, or Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, also closing down by 0.8% on Friday. Also, another area of weakness, consumer staples, particularly tobacco stocks. You saw the likes of Altria down 0.8%, and Philip Morris International closing down 2%. So although we ended on a positive front in Friday's session and a daily gain for US equities, we still see that weekly decline, 2.2% for the S&P 500, the third straight weekly decline for that index. Elsewhere, the Dow Jones closed up by 0.2%, the Nasdaq up by 0.3%. On Thursday, we saw this move into haven assets and away from riskier assets as we got sort of more substantive lines on the trade tensions between the US and China. But those haven-type assets not performing in the same exciting manner today in Friday's session. The yield on US 10-year fell by 7 basis points on Thursday to its lowest level since October 2017, but was little changed at 2.32% on Friday. In the currency space, not a lot of action. The Bloomberg dollar spot index closed down 0.2%, but actually that was its biggest drop in 3 weeks. It followed disappointing US durable goods data, but not much driving the currency markets. Broadly, the dollar was weaker against most of its major peers, and gold, which performed on Thursday, playing up to its haven asset status, was little changed and in fact a touch weaker during Friday's session. But that's what we're seeing, a chance for breath in the markets on Friday. Thin liquidity ahead of a holiday weekend in the United States following 2 days of losses in the equity market, a big move to haven assets on Thursday, and now investors have this long weekend to digest the ongoing trade war between the US and China. Ed Ludlow, Bloomberg News, San Francisco.
All right, let's turn to the Asian markets now just to see how they're faring. I'm joined live by Rosalind Chin, who's joining us from the Bloomberg studios in Hong Kong. How do we set up for the day and for the week, Rosalind? What are the initial signs that you're picking up?
I think investors here are looking for cues, actually. Not a lot of movement across the weekend, and as Ed mentioned earlier, it's a long weekend in both the UK and the US as well, although there have been European elections, more on that in a little bit. But while there hasn't been anything major happening in terms of the trade tensions, investors are kind of looking to see whether things are stabilizing after 3 weeks of losses here in the Asian market. So right now, the MSCI Asia Pacific index is pretty flat, losing just a touch, down by 0.05% at this moment in time. The other markets are not looking particularly exciting either, but the Nikkei is gaining about 10 to 1%. Topics is up by about a fifth of 1%. Now, we do have President Trump visiting Tokyo right now. He has been in a welcome ceremony with the new emperor of China, the new emperor of Japan, Naruhito, and he has been saying that they've made great progress in terms of trade talks with Japan. We've seen some advancement in the Japanese indices on the idea or the suggestion that Trump is going to hold off on pushing through a trade deal during this visit. He's probably going to hold off until the elections in July. So, while Trump has been entertained on this visit, actually trade negotiators are behind the scenes trying to hammer out more details of a trade deal that is still to come. Right now, looking at the yen, we have the yen at 109.42 to the US dollar. Now, cryptocurrencies actually are one of the more exciting spaces we could possibly mention today, because that actually surged to a level not seen in about a year or so. The fresh one-year highs above $8,700. So, yep, you're still forking out a lot of money for those Bitcoin. We've got the current price at $8,838.43 US dollars for one Bitcoin there. So that making a bit of a comeback there. Elsewhere in the region, Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index just opened down 0.5%. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Rosalind. Well, that's how the Asian markets look this morning. Let's turn now to Neeraj Shah, who's joining me to tell you all about the trade setup for the day in India. A lot of our viewers, Neeraj, are very excited to see you this early in the morning. But
very kind of them.
how do we look this early on Monday?
Well, Alex, the setup may indicate a start which is slightly flattish in trade, though the US markets stayed okay and the rest of the Asian pack is doing okay. The SGX Nifty indicating a start which is marginally in the red. But keep in mind, I think that the view is now shifting to that if indeed the bottom for the market is created, whether at 11,200, whether at 11,500, whatever the case may be, but because the domestic political outcome is not going to be the big thing, the view has shifted to what the mid caps and the small caps will do. Now, see this, from the lows, the Nifty has risen about 17%, the Jan 2018 lows. Mid caps and small caps about 8-9%. So the relative underperformance of the mid caps and the small caps vis-a-vis the Nifty, 25%, 33%. So now everybody's shifting focus to whether the broader markets will now start staying stable or outperforming, and therefore would individual portfolios do well or no. FIs continue to pump in money, so that stays stable. And in Friday's session as well, you've seen the FIs pump in about 2,000 crores. So that brings the week to having a very good number. Save for one day, FIs by and large have put in positive flows all through the last week, despite the uncertainty. That tells you something about the kind of mood change that has happened, because until last Friday in the month of May, it was a negative number almost every single day. It's a busy day today because there are a lot of results that are going to come out. So you'll have Adani Ports, and remember, this stock has been very active, Alex, you would remember, since the last few days. Zee Entertainment remains a very key stock to monitor simply because of the news flow surrounding and the volatility surrounding it. GAIL will be an important number because it's on the index. And then at the broader end of the spectrum, you have some large names, Motherson Sumi, and whether the trade war has impacted that company, Interglobe Aviation, and lots being spoken about the company, and between the two promoters, the kind of a difference of opinion that is there, as well as Colgate Palmolive, and all eyes will be on whether they can match the same store sales growth or the volume growth numbers, excuse me, because all the other companies have found to be a bit wanting. But that's all for the rest of the day. I think for the day today at 9:15 a.m., what will we monitor for? One, NBFCs, because the RBI has suggested those tighter liquidity norms, and brokerages believe they'll hit margins for NBFCs, and it will be worse off for NBFCs with the ALM gap, low ratings, high funding costs, and we all know the list, right? So they might be under pressure today. So watch out for NBFCs. Watch out for some result reactions, the likes of NTPC, which has come out with a slightly negative set of numbers. So that one could be in focus today. Not the best of outings for NTPC. So that one will be in focus, and a bunch of other companies, Agam, which will be watched out for. So in terms of result reactions, it's a very important morning today.
Thanks so much for that, Neeraj. Of course, Neeraj will be back in just a short while to take you through the opening of markets that starts at 8 o'clock, goes all the way up to 10 o'clock. So do stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint. For now, let's turn to what's making headlines across the globe. David Engels and Tom McKenzie of Bloomberg News bring you the First Word headlines.
Nigel Farage's Brexit party has polled very strongly in England here as results roll in from the EU parliamentary elections. In Italy, the anti-immigrant League looks to have won about 30%, while Marine Le Pen's Eurosceptic national rally appeared on course, in fact, for a win in France. Now, earlier, the European Parliament projected that the Christian Democrats and Socialists will remain still the two biggest groups.
And UK Environment Secretary Michael Gove has become the 8th MP to enter the race to succeed Prime Minister Theresa May. Other candidates include former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, his replacement Jeremy Hunt, and former Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab. May steps down on June 7th, admitting defeat in her 3-year quest to deliver Brexit after failing 3 times to get her deal through Parliament.
Now, a British man has become the 10th climber to die on Mount Everest this week as a record number of people try to reach the summit during this brief window of good weather. Now, that's led to an extraordinary, as you can see there, traffic jam of climbers on the Nepali side of the highest mountain. Now, Nepal's tourism ministry issued a record 381 permits to mountaineers this season to climb Everest at about $11,000 a pop.
Fiat Chrysler is poised to announce an operational tie-up with Renault as soon as Monday. That could lead to a full merger, creating the world's 3rd biggest automaker. Bloomberg sources say the deal could involve an initial exchange of equity. We're told Renault's existing alliance partners, Nissan and Mitsubishi, are not involved, although they would be invited in at a later time.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about something that Neeraj mentioned in his trade setup. The Reserve Bank of India has released draft rules proposing to tighten the liquidity framework for NBFCs. The regulator wants to bring in a robust governance and reporting structure to monitor risk and bring in liquidity coverage ratio, much like in banks, which will ensure the non-banking financial corporations have some buffer during times of stress. The RBI has also sought to increase the monitoring of asset liability mismatch and stricter governance norms. We have a story available on the website with all the details therein. Now, weak LNG imports could lead to a decline in transmission volumes for GAIL in the 4th quarter. As a result, profit may also take a hit. Soumit Sarkar is here to tell you all about the numbers. Morning, Soumit. What are the headline numbers first, and what are the key takeaways for this quarter?
Good morning, Alex. For GAIL India, if you see compared to last quarter on a standalone basis, the revenues are expected to be down by nearly 6% to close to 1,18,650 crore rupees. Net profit is expected to be lower by nearly 14% to close to 1,400 crore rupees. EBITDA is expected to be down by nearly 12%, while the margins are expected to contract to 12.6%. Now, the gas transmission volumes, if you see, they are expected to remain flat at close to 107.6 MMSCMD, while the petrochemical volumes are expected to increase by nearly 13% to close to 1,95,700 metric tons. Now, it is expected to be a weak 4th quarter for GAIL India due to lower LPG prices, weak LNG imports, and because of low spot LNG prices. Now, only petrochemical business and the LPG transmission business should be better compared to last quarter. Now, if you see with the decline in oil prices, LPG prices also declined, but with a lag effect, because of which the LPG segment of the company will be weak. Along with that, if you see the LNG imports were weak in the fourth quarter, which could lead to a decline in the transmission volumes. As you can see, the volumes are literally flat compared to last quarter. Now, the marketing segment, that is the natural gas trading business, is expected to be weak due to falling LNG trading margins due to compression in the US gas prices versus the oil-linked or the spot LNG prices in Asia. Now, lower LNG prices are also could also result into inventory loss for GAIL India in the fourth quarter of financial year 2019. Now, the petrochemical business, that is expected to outperform because the third quarter was impacted by a shutdown. So, sequentially, petchem business would report a strong set of numbers. Lastly, the LPG transmission segment EBIT would be better due to the tariff increases which were effective from 1st November 2018, but the amount for this for the last 5 months of financial year 2019 will come in the fourth quarter. So LPG transmission could see a higher number on the EBIT side. Lastly, key things to watch out for from GAIL India earnings would include the updates on the HVJ pipeline tariffs, along with that updates on commissioning of other gas pipeline projects, the status on the Kochi-Mangalore pipeline project, along with that management commentary on visibility of placement of the US contracts and transmission, and any guidance on transmission volumes and trading volumes would be important to watch out for from GAIL India earnings today.
Lots of important earnings that we need to look at today, but let's first start with this toxin news. Biocon Pharma's new drug application for Pemetrex's Disodium received tentative approval from the US FDA on May 23rd. This drug may help in killing cancer cells. FDC's board approves buyback of 34.3 lakh shares at 350 rupees per share, aggregating to 120 crore rupees. June 7th is the record date for this buyback. Music Broadcast terminates its business transfer agreement to acquire radio business of Ananda's Offset's Friends 91.9 FM on account of uncertainty of receipt of regulatory approvals. Then let's look at the important earnings. Grasim Industries came in with good numbers. Their revenues are up 16% at 5,352 crores. EBITDA is up 6% at 899 crores. And raw material as a percentage of sales is 46% versus 42% last year. There was a deferred tax reversal of 60 crores in the base quarter. NCC came in with very good numbers. Their revenues are up 44% to 3,761 crores. Net profits up 4 times at 188 crores. EBITDA is up 58% at 475 crores. And margins stand at 12.6% versus 11.4%. Then we have Indraprastha Gas, which came in with inline set of numbers. Their revenues are up 27% at 1,543 crores. Net profits up 29% at 225 crores. And total volumes are up to 17% to 6.27 MMS CMD versus 5.36 MMS CMD. Their EBITDA per SCM is down 3% to 5.8 rupees. Bata came in with good numbers as well. Their revenues are up 7% at 679 crores. Net profits up 73% at 88 crores. EBITDA is up 15% at 94 crores and margins stand at 13.9% versus 13% last year. There was a tax reversal of 20 crores in the current quarter. Dish TV lastly came in with weak numbers. Their revenues are down 9% at 1,399 crores. There's a net loss of 1,360 crores versus a net profit of 121 crores last year. An exceptional loss of 1,563 crores in the current quarter. Their other expenses are down 54% at 91 crores versus 196 crores.
Several stories available on the website bloombergquint.com for you to view and for you to read over the course of today. Let me take you through a couple of them. The Commerce and Industry Ministry has proposed cutting down compliance time to just 1 hour per month for startups as part of measures to ease regulatory requirements for budding entrepreneurs. And in the international automotive space, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles is poised to announce an operational tie-up with Renault as early as today, and that could lead to a full merger of the two companies, which would create the world's third largest automotive company. That's a Bloomberg report. The deal could involve an initial exchange of equity. Renault's existing alliance partners Nissan and Mitsubishi aren't involved at the moment, but they would be invited at a later time to join forces with the merged Fiat Renault. All right, that's all you need to know going into trade today. Do stay tuned. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot more coming up on Bloomberg Quint. Thanks so much for watching.